A new NFL league year awaits us today. New possibilities, new expectations, and ultimately new hope for 32 teams. The league year does open at 4 o'clock Eastern today, but the NFL did not make us wait until then to begin making moves. So what's already happened just becomes official when the clock strikes 4 on the East Coast. But there are still plenty of deals to work out and trades to make. And, well, fans love to win the offseason, but the ultimate goal is being the ultimate winner headed into next offseason. The early Super Bowl odds have the Eagles back-to-back. The Ravens and Chiefs both at plus 700. Then we've got the Bills, Lions, and 49ers. Here are the notable moves by some of these contenders. A lot of turnover on the Eagles defense. Not a lot of turnovers. They do a lot of turnovers, yeah, in that Super Bowl. Joe Thuney is out in Kansas City. Ravens keep Ronnie Stanley, adding D-Hop. Bills with some pass rush help and holding on to their quarterback for many, many years and many, many dollars. Let's welcome in Pete Prisco and Kyle Long to the discussion and going through some of these teams and some of the moves that they made to hopefully re-up and get back in Super Bowl position, starting with the Eagles. Their Super Bowl defense is elsewhere around the league, but with so much depth, how much of a drop-off do you actually expect there to be?
Well, I'm not very concerned about the Philadelphia Eagles because I just heard Pete talking on another show the other day that the Philadelphia Eagles are a lot better than we all thought, and they're a great football team. And while they are missing some pieces coming into the offseason, it's the cost of winning Super Bowls. It's the cost of being a champion. The kids say it costs to be a boss, Pete. And that's what the Philadelphia Eagles are. They're still able to retain the great part of that center of that defense. Zach Bond obviously re-signed. A lot of these guys going off the roster, but with the way they develop talent, the coaching level in Philadelphia, that matters, Pete.
Yeah, and you look at these guys. Okay, Josh Sweat, Hunt will replace him. He played really well. You saw him come down the stretch. He had a sack in the Super Bowl. Milton Williams, they have some young players. Plus, they have 2 starters that are ready to go in the middle in there with, Carter and Davis.
Yep.
Rodgers was a backup anyways. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, they like Sidney Brown. He was hurt last year, coming off an injury, didn't play as much. They're ready to replace him. Plus, Howie Roseman does such a great job of drafting and replacing that I don't think you have to worry about the Eagles.
The Chiefs, who also played in the Super Bowl, reworking some contracts to clear up some money, about $50 million between Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones. So what do you think about what they've done with that extra cash so far?
Well, I think they had to address the left tackle position, and they did. They got a young guy. Now, there's some questions about him. He stepped in and did some good things for Trent Williams last year. Jalen Moore, I think he will start at left tackle. And what that does is it allows him to move Suamatia. Go ahead.
It's Kingsley Suamataia.
Suamataia.
There you go.
There you go. I said that wrong about 8 times, but
it's tough
because it's pronounced a bunch of ways when you go online and look at it, by the way. But he's going to move to left guard. That makes them bigger. That makes them stronger. That makes them better. And I think that's a smart thing for them. The offensive line was a major issue. We saw that in the Super Bowl. And then you go get Fulton to play corner. Fulton from the Chargers, Christian Fulton will go in there now, and you can move McDuffie back inside in obvious passing situations. And I think that helps them as well. So I think the Chiefs have had a nice, you bring back Hollywood Brown, they've had a nice offseason so far.
And you know what? I think it's important to look backwards to get an idea of what we're going to be looking at ahead with the Kansas City Chiefs. And people like to compare this Chiefs dynasty to the Patriots dynasty. Obviously, they got a great quarterback and all these guys that can fit in Spags' defense. And obviously, Andy Reid getting the most out of the offensive side of the ball. And when you look at Patrick Mahomes, it's awesome to see a guy like him saying, hey, you know what, I can restructure. And restructure can mean any number of things, but it's going to make it easier for Brett Veach and the people in the cap room in Kansas City to make these big acquisitions happen. Then you get it on the defensive side of the ball with Chris Jones, and that's the 2 captains of both sides of the ball committing to it, the 2 highest paid guys. That's huge for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think it bodes well for them.
Yeah, you know what restructure means? Give me more cash up front and just restructure.
Yeah, we'll figure it out on the back end.
Well, any player will take that all day.
Yeah, no one's taking any pay cuts.
No,
it only goes up
necessarily. Yeah, they did not donate that extra $50 million to help, but that's what the cap guys are for, is to move that money around and to make it work. The other team in the AFC that has the same amount of Super Bowl odds, the Ravens, their key moves so far have been on the offensive side of the ball. Kyle, what do you think of these moves?
Well, it's the blind side. Ronnie Stanley, he's been an absolute stud since the day he walked out of Notre Dame's doors. He was taught by Harry Heastand. To get him back into the building, the left tackle that Lamar Jackson, the MVP, or could have been the MVP, is familiar with. That's a big deal for Baltimore. And I know it's a guy who's leaning on the wrong side of 30 here, but this dude can play football. These guys don't grow on trees. To get him back was huge for that football team. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins at the bottom of the list is a big one, but there were moments in the biggest moments of the season where he didn't show up for the Kansas City Chiefs. And Pat Ricard, obviously a no-brainer, big part of your identity in Baltimore.
But this is all about Stanley and retaining him. Now, the question with Stanley is, Stanley played every game last year. In the past, Stanley hasn't played every game, and there have been some people who have questioned whether he's really been truly hurt at times. So he has to stay on the field. If he stays on the field, fine. But was that a contract year where he pushed to get the big money? Who knows, but we'll see.
We'll see. We'll see what happens with the Bills as well. A little pass rush shuffle. Joey Bosa is coming in. Von Miller is going out. I'll be devil's advocate here. Joey Bosa has missed 23 games over the last 2 seasons due to injury. So what should we think about that?
But it's a one-year deal, and so there's really no risk there, and they need him in bubble wrap until the playoffs. That's what they need to do. Joey,
that's what we said about Von, too.
Take the whole season, take the entire season, get yourself ready for the playoffs. I think it's a great move for them, and I even put that out there a while ago. I thought Joey Bosa to the Bills made a lot of sense. In talking to the Bills people at the Combine, 2 things they wanted to get. They wanted to get better rushing the passer, and they wanted to get somebody at receiver who could go down the field a little bit more than what they had. They went out and they got Josh Palmer, and on the surface doesn't look like a great move, but he's 25 years old. He's averaged over 15 yards per catch the last 2 seasons, and so that tells you he can get down the field. That'll help open up the offense, and I think getting Bosa is big for them. Ogunjobi in the middle, they just signed him as well. That helps their defense in the middle as well. So I like what they did, but more than anything, they took care of their own. I mean, Shakir, Bernard, Russo all get new contracts.
That's a whole stampede of bison right there. Yeah. By the way, they're not buffaloes. In the United States of America, we call them bison. And I think there's a lot of misnomers out there about that. And that's what we call a stampede.
Is that your analysis from
That's what we call a stampede right there.
You want to change the name?
But I will say this. Me and Pete sat here on this very desk and said that the only reason the Buffalo Bills wouldn't be able to hoist that Lombardi trophy was because of the fact that they couldn't manufacture a pass rush, whether it's winning with a single guy or being able to scheme up some stuff. Now they bring in a guy, and to your credit, you gave Von Miller credit. We were going to give him the benefit of the doubt. They never really showed up the way that we wanted that rush to show up. Hopefully, Joey Bosa can stay in the bubble wrap, and come the time when Josh Allen's maybe winning another MVP, this guy can go get you 3-4 sacks in a flurry of games.
Yeah, I love the move. I really do.
I heard the word hope here. Did they get better for their pass rush?
I feel like it's a lateral move, honestly.
I think he's better.
If you're talking about when you need the biggest plays in the biggest moments, Von Miller can beat those guys.
But he didn't last year.
He's got that rush.
He didn't last year.
We don't know if Joey Bosa is going to make it to that point.
Yeah, well, he's got to stay on the field.
And this is why it's a prove-it year.
Yeah, he's got to stay on the field, no question about that. But Von Miller wasn't the same guy. He just wasn't. And I love Von Miller. He's one of my favorite guys that I've ever dealt with in this league. But he'd be probably the first one to admit it. He wasn't the same guy.
All right. How about the Lions? Back end of the defense, the secondary, bringing in DJ Reed, a handful of other moves for this team. How did Detroit get better?
Well, I think you have to understand what kind of football team this is. They're going to score a lot of points, and we saw that. And even without Ben Johnson, they still retain that offensive line. So other teams are going to be throwing that thing all over the yard, trying to play catch-up with Jared Goff and his offense. So to be able to retain guys and then be able to add pieces on that back end, you're seeing DJ Reed highlighted right there. It's a big-time thing for this Lions team. There is no substitute for a good back end. I mean, you can rush all day, but if guys are wide open, you can throw that thing up. They're not going to let that thing happen in Detroit like they did at the end of the year.
Health is the biggest difference for this team. They lost their coordinators, but they need the guys on defense, mainly Hutchinson and McNeil, to get back and be healthy. And if they do, they'll be fine on the defensive side of the ball. They have some issues that you're concerned, a little bit of concern, though. When you look at the offensive line, you love the offensive line. You know, what are they going to do with Zeitler? Is he going to come back? What are they going to do? The age is starting to creep in there. The left guard wasn't very good last year. You know, Decker's getting up in the years. So you're starting to get a little concerned about the offensive line. But I think this organization knows that. They'll address it, and they'll get guys in the draft.
I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with the 49ers when the new league year officially opens up, because so far it seems like a lot more out than in. But of course, a lot of that has to do with what's happening with the quarterback and Brock Purdy. Micah Parsons acknowledging that, saying no more rookie quarterback. LOL, welcome to reality. I would maybe push back and say that there's a lot of teams in the league that don't have rookie quarterbacks that are still able to make moves. What say you, Pete?
You look at everybody's killing the 49ers, but really when you go down the list, go each individual guy that they've lost. lost. Charvarius Ward is a good player, but didn't play very well last year, in large part because he had a lot of stuff going on off the field. Dre Greenlaw didn't play last year, remember? He was hurt. He played a game and a half. Hufanga was hurt last year, didn't play a lot last year. Banks was their worst offensive lineman, I thought, and the Packers overpaid for him. Elijah Mitchell's a backup. Joshua Dobbs is a backup. Deebo Samuel was 20 pounds too heavy last year and didn't play like himself. So when you really evaluate the guys, they lost. Jalen Moore, another one that he was a backup if Trent Williams was on the field. Did they really lose all that much? They really didn't.
They're just it's going to be a new look, but same big-time players there. But as you said, guys like Dre Greenlaw, you counted on to be healthy. They weren't healthy. The Niners are going to have to figure out that window has closed. They need to figure out a new window to get into the dance with.
And then you look at their defensive line; those guys are gone too. Malik Collins and Hargrave and Leonard Floyd. They let go. Why? They couldn't stop the run. Not a one of those guys was that great against the run, and so they're just revamping what they do. Don't worry about the Niners; they still have stars on that team.
You're less worried about what's going out. What about what's coming in? Do you still need to see more from this team?
Yeah, I'd like to see some more moves. I think they need to address some particularly corner. I think that's a position they need to address. I think they will in the draft. But again, Kittle, Trent Williams, Fred Warner, McCaffrey, he's on the field. They have stars still. Yeah. They still can make plays, and they still will be a factor.
I think the writing's on the wall for the San Francisco 49ers. We saw McCaffrey and big pieces in that offense deal with a lot of health issues last year. Moving forward, can we count on Christian McCaffrey to be that same prolific day-in, day-out playmaker?
That's another story.
They're going to have to figure out how to manufacture some offense if that guy's not ready to go, and if the other stars on that team aren't at full steam.
Yeah, and let's be real. There's probably some heat on that organization right now on John Lynch and on Kyle Shanahan. I don't think that's the case, but some people will look at it from that standpoint and say there is.
It's never all pretty for any of these guys upstairs.
I feel like the word health came up a lot in this conversation. Obviously, that's, of course, one of the biggest things in the NFL is the availability. This is one of the biggest things in all of podcasts. Is it good enough for me to say that, Kyle?
Yeah, and there's my handsome co-host, Mike Renner, over there getting mic'd up right now. That is perfect.
I know. We get both members of the Pushing the Pile podcast with Kyle
Michael.
And Mike. You can watch by scanning that QR code and listen wherever you get your podcasts. We've got some breaking news out of the NFL where the Rams are releasing former All-Pro wide receiver Cooper Kupp. The former Offensive Player of the Year had 2 more years remaining on his contract and a cap hit just under $30 million next season. Kupp tallied 67 catches and 710 yards this past season, which was his lowest since 2018. He'll now become one of the top free agent wide receivers in the NFL this offseason. Let's welcome in NFL insider Jonathan Jones, and we'll start here. Why do you think the Rams were unable to find a trade partner for A1 Cooper Kupp?
Yeah, so look, it's been a while since he had that Triple Crown season and since they won that Super Bowl. Ever since then, he has not been able, unfortunately, to stay healthy, Cooper Kupp. And so, as you noted just a moment ago, the lack of production, in large part because of the difficulty staying on the field, along with the fact that this upcoming season he'll be 32 years old, along with the fact that he had a cap hit of nearly $30 million. All of those things combined meant that there was really no chance at all that the LA Rams were ever going to find a trade partner for Cooper Kupp. They knew that. They knew it was outside the realm of possibility, but it did no harm to the Rams to wait for a couple of weeks to see if someone came calling for Kupp, or at least if someone would pick up the phone when they went calling about Cooper Kupp. And so what has been anticipated and expected for several weeks now is now going to be official at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. on the West Coast, and that will be that Cooper Kupp will officially be released. He has been granted his release. It's only a matter of hours before that becomes officially official. And then at that point, he will be able to resume conversations with any other interested teams for his services.
Yeah, we've been waiting a while for this to become officially official, but this is news that we've been anticipating for a long time now, which means other teams have known that Cooper Kupp would eventually become available. So what are some landing spots that would make sense for him?
All right, well, the top landing spot that I have heard around the league for Cooper Kupp has been the Dallas Cowboys, a team that has created so much cap space, yet has not really done a whole lot in free agency. When you consider the Dallas Cowboys, you have to think that, okay, they have a quarterback in Dak Prescott. You're talking about a 31 going on 32-year-old wide receiver who has been to the top of the mountain, so he wants to remain with a contender. And so the Dallas Cowboys hoping to remain at least a playoff contender and hopefully get back to that conference championship game that has eluded them for the better part of 3 decades. You also have to consider connections here. And the Dallas Cowboys wide receivers coach that they just hired is a man named Junior Adams. Junior Adams was at Eastern Washington when Cooper Kupp got to Eastern Washington. In fact, Kupp has referred to him in the past as the best wide receivers coach that he had ever been with. And so that is yet another connection, along with the fact that, yes, the Dallas Cowboys could use a guy like Cooper Kupp. Look, has age caught up to him? Have injuries caught up to him? Does he separate perhaps the way that he was doing so in that Triple Crown season? No, of course not. However, at the right price, and it may take a while to figure out that price. Cooper Kupp, he's never been a free agent before. He may, like many others before him, want to go around and enjoy that free agency tour, be wooed by other teams, hear their offers, and then ultimately make a decision. But a lot of folks that I speak with believe that the Dallas Cowboys are probably at the top of the list as it stands right now before that free agency tour begins. One other team that should be considered, the Seattle Seahawks. Obviously, Cooper Kupp being from the great state of Washington. Also, the Seahawks cutting Tyler Lockett, trading away DK Metcalf, and now adding Sam Darnold. They need some more wide receivers, so that could be a potential landing spot, staying within the division in the NFC West. So those are the 2 spots right now that I think a lot of folks around the league see Cooper Kupp landing, the Dallas Cowboys and the Seattle Seahawks.
Yeah, what's helping his market is it's not a very deep free agent wide receiver market right now, but looks like a pretty good draft. So that's the math the teams have to figure out. JJ, thank you so much. You can get your latest NFL news on CBS Sports HQ. We have you covered when that new league year officially opens up at 4 p.m. Eastern, and all the latest happenings throughout the NFL offseason. Let's welcome on Pete Prisco here to discuss the news. Cooper Kupp officially released from the Rams. You heard JJ talk about some potential landing spots. He seems like he's eyeing in on the Cowboys. What do you think of that potential marriage?
I think it would work for Cooper Kupp. It would work for the Cowboys. They need to get another weapon to go with CeeDee Lamb. They need somebody else that can be a productive wide receiver. They've had problems throwing to other guys. I think it would work. Price will be an issue. You know, Jerry Jones doesn't like to spend money on free agents, at least hasn't over the recent years, so that would be something to consider. I think Seattle makes some sense. I think, you know, you look at their wide receiver room, it's not very good. I'll give you another one. Throw out Jacksonville in there a little bit. Maybe, you know, the connections are there. You know, James Gladstone, the new GM, was with the Rams, was their personnel guy, and also Liam Cohn coached with the Rams, and so they do have some familiarity with Cooper Kupp. So maybe that's another possibility. But I'm with JJ. I think it's going to take a little time. I think he's going to do a little bit of a tour and enjoy his free agency.
Yeah, that's when we look at all those off-season moves from the personnel standpoint and see who's gone where. That's a good connection there in Jacksonville. Unfortunately, though, he has missed at least 5 games in each of the past 3 seasons. How much do you think that had to do with LA willing to part with him?
Well, also, his numbers have gone down.
Yes.
And age and productivity weren't equal to the contract. And I think when you get to that level, then you have to set him free. They tried to trade him. Nobody was going to trade him for that contract. And so now he's a free agent. Here's the thing you notice about Cooper Kupp. 13.7 yards per catch when he had the Triple Crown season. Last year it was 10.6. That's a big shrinkage. That's a lot of numbers going down. And when you look at it from that standpoint, when a guy starts getting older and those numbers, the yards per catch goes down, I think that's where you start realizing that he's not the same receiver, and he's not. And injuries have impacted him in a big way, but he doesn't run. He never was a burner, but now he doesn't run the way he used to run. If you have another guy on the other side, say CeeDee Lamb, or Brian Thomas in Jacksonville, or even Smith and Jigba in Seattle, that can do the big play work, then you can do the dirty work with him in the middle of the field. He still can do that. So the Rams' problem were they had guys, none of them could run, and so they kind of squeezed the field a little bit. So I think he needs to get with a team that has a #1 wide receiver.
Real quick, let's look at the Rams side of things, because now they have Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua. That's going to be their duo. What do you think about what's left in LA?
Well, again, they still don't run very well because Devontae Adams will be 33 in December, and he's never been a burner either. So they have to. I think this draft has to be about finding speed for the Rams. Puka Nacua, You know, he can do a lot of stuff in the middle field, not a burner. Devontae Adams, great route runner, not a burner. They did bring back Tutu Atwell, who can run, but he doesn't do a lot. He hasn't been used a bunch. I think they need to get speed on that offense so they can stretch the field a little bit and then come back and open it up. Look, Sean McVay does a great job of scheming his guys open. There's no doubt about that. But at some point, and everybody who's ever played defense in this league knows, when you line up against a guy who can run, he puts the fear of God in you. They don't have that right now.
It sounds like the NFL draft could potentially be a good place for them to find some young, speedy wide receivers. I don't know if you paid attention to the combine, but there are lots of options there at the wide receiver position. Pete Prisco, thank you so much. Here are some upcoming NFL dates. The new league year officially opening today, but as we've said throughout the day, we've already got all the moves coming fast and furious. And the owners' meetings happen March 30th through April the 2nd. And then a chance to get some speedy wide receivers, some young guys in the NFL draft in late April.
All right, welcome on to CBS Sports HQ. We have a packed desk here. I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino, Chris Hassel, Kyle Long, DK, Pete Prisco. We're going to talk about free agency, of course, what we've seen looking ahead, and then also officially the start of the new league year, Chris.
Yes, and we still don't know where Aaron Rodgers is going to play, but Brett Favre has some advice for him. Brett Favre saying that he wants Aaron Rodgers to follow directly in his footprints, right? Green Bay, Jets, Vikings. Favre saying the Vikings is the best spot for Aaron Rodgers. If it's Aaron Rodgers' decision, Pete, should he go to Minnesota?
Aaron Rodgers, if he's making the decision, should run to Minnesota because it's a great situation. You got a great coach. You got the weapons. You can throw it around. They made Sam Darnold look good. They're gonna. I mean, Aaron Rodgers threw 28 touchdown passes last year. 28. He threw more than Mahomes. He threw more than Herbert. He threw more than a lot of guys. He wasn't bad last year. But I will say this. If you're the Vikings, why would you do that to your young quarterback? It makes no sense from that standpoint. Because if you're truly all in on J.J. McCarthy, you don't bring Aaron Rodgers in to be the #1 quarterback. So I think from that standpoint, it's not good for the Vikings. It would be great for Aaron Rodgers.
What he said. I mean, really, I agree. I agree in totality. It's a great situation. Agree with you on what they did with Sam Darnold. And Kevin O'Connell is a quarterback whisperer of sorts. The talent on the outside is there. You could win. You could be a playoff team. But my massive question is, I don't think Kevin O'Connell wants this to happen. I think from all indications and them willing to part ways with Sam Darnold and let him go tells you what they think of J.J. McCarthy. They've had a year to watch him. I know he's been rehabbing, but they get a feel of the leadership capabilities, the work ethic, how he relates with his teammates, how he is in the locker room. They are clearly there, and it is not a situation where I think you'd want to bring in Aaron Rodgers in this role of mentor. Where has that worked where it's like, oh, this is great, specifically with Aaron Rodgers, where he's going to be like, sure, after a year, I'll hand off the reins to you. It just typically doesn't work that way. So unless there is some alarm or concern about J.J. McCarthy, I think it's a bad move.
Yeah, unless there's some sort of rehab or injury setback that we're not aware of, then I would think that totally the Minnesota Vikings would be leaning on J.J. McCarthy. And with the instability that Aaron Rodgers had to deal with in New York, with the head coaching changes, the way the defense fell apart, fingers pointed, you wouldn't get that in Minnesota. So I understand why the Vikings would lend itself to a destination for Aaron Rodgers. They've got complete receiver room. They've got a brilliant young coach. They have a lot to offer and stability there. But the formational stuff, is that going to work with what Aaron Rodgers likes? I heard you complain all year about he just doesn't want to change his tune.
He doesn't like motion. He doesn't like pre-snap motion.
Getting with the times offensively. Kevin O'Connell's cutting edge. Would they be able to meet in the middle? I don't know, but I don't think it'll be Minnesota.
All right, so Aaron Rodgers is no longer there with the New York Jets, but Justin Fields is. He was out in Dubai celebrating that big contract that he got. And we saw, Sam Darnold, as you guys mentioned, have a, resurrected career in Minnesota, and then Baker Mayfield did it the year prior with Tampa Bay. Danny, I'll start with you. Do you think Justin Fields can kind of, do something similar under Aaron Glenn in this new regime with the Jets for his career?
It depends. I think it would look different than those guys who are more your pocket passers who are throwing. I mean, Baker Mayfield had 40 touchdown passes this year. He's been phenomenal throwing the football. I think it depends on the Jets' willingness to build an offense around Justin Fields and utilizing his legs and in making him the type of quarterback that he was at Chicago, where he had 1,000 yards rushing, and saying, you know what, I know it's risky to run your quarterback, but we're going to throw out what we've always known and embrace the running capability. It puts the defense in such a bind when you have to respect that run game. It gives your running backs better counts. It keeps everybody has to be keeps them honest if a quarterback can run the football. A Jalen Hurts type of model, if you will, what they've done in Philadelphia. What I don't know is, are the Jets going to do that? I would hope so, considering that they brought him in. There has to be a plan to do that and give him a strong run game, much to like they gave Jared Goff in Detroit, and they saw the success they had there. But I would say you embrace the running ability. Jared Goff clearly is about as pocket passer as they get. Embrace the athleticism, embrace his ability to run, and I think he could.
Both of these teams that Justin Fields has been on have a locker room full of guys who really rally around and believe in Justin Fields. Now, it hasn't shaken out to give him a fair go at playing quarterback, but with this third stop in his career, I truly think it's an opportunity for him to take leadership in what has essentially been a void in leadership, with the head coach leaving last year, Aaron Rodgers departing this offseason. I hope for nothing but the best for Justin Fields, and I think obviously he's got some playmakers, but he's a tough guy. You can rely on him physically. He's never really been out of the lineup for very long for any of the teams he's been on.
You know, the thing about the Baker Mayfield stuff, we have to stop that. Baker Mayfield was really good his rookie year, and he got hurt, which is why it didn't work out in Cleveland. They decided to go make that wonderful move to go get Deshaun Watson and pay him a bunch of guaranteed money and give up all the picks that they did in the worst trade in the history of the National Football League. But that's an aside to the whole thing. But Baker Mayfield was a good player. Justin Fields has had moments where he's been a good player. Can he make those moments last? That's the question. Because you're right. You got to kind of cater it around to him, build it around him. But when you look at the Jets on paper, what were their other options? Play Tyrod Taylor? They had to get a quarterback. This is a 2-year quarterback. They'll give him a chance to show what he can do. If he does show well and he plays well, then you extend him and he's your quarterback. If he doesn't, then you're back in the pool and you're looking. But right now, they had to make that move.
Fields trying to work his way to one of those mega contracts that we've seen. Josh Allen resetting the market recently with a 6-year, $330 million deal that had $250 million guaranteed. But he said today it wasn't necessarily all about the money to him. He said he hopes it doesn't hinder the team at all.
I live a pretty good life. Got a house, got a car. We're good. But I wasn't looking to absolutely kill them at every chance that I could. And I told my agent that. I was like, hey, if this has any impact on the pack, or impact on the cap, I should say, let's figure out a way to not do that.
Yeah, you see the big numbers coming out and the record-setting money and the $250 guaranteed, but are there ways in there that he helped this Buffalo Bills team, Pete?
Well, his cap number this year was outrageous. It was $44 million. So just by doing the extension, it helped them in a great deal. He could have held out for more. He could have got more money. And look, I get it. He loves being in Buffalo. He's made a ton of money. I mean, you won't be able to spend all the money he's made in his career. But you know, guys get criticized around the league for leaving money on the table. That's a choice. You make that choice. You know,
Who's
Chris Godwin
criticizing them?
Well,
I mean, if I'm a fan, I love
Chris
this.
Godwin got criticized for leaving money on the table. He didn't take all the money New England offered him. He wanted to stay in Tampa. He wants to stay in Buffalo. He likes Buffalo. Believe it or not, he likes Buffalo. People sit there and say, well, why do you like Buffalo? It's a small town feel. He's a small town guy. He enjoys Buffalo, and he likes playing there. New stadium on the horizon. What's not to like? They're close to winning the Super Bowl. So I think he might have taken a little less money. And you can criticize him for all you want for it, but he did. Tom Brady used
criticizing.
You hear people saying it all the time. Don't ever leave money on the table.
I think it's great. I think it should almost be expected of franchise quarterbacks these days if you want to win championships.
I think so too, but I guarantee there's some agents that don't like this. And I guarantee there's some other quarterbacks potentially don't like this. Guys that always want to. What is the mantra that we've heard? The latest quarterback is going to break the record. He's not up there with Dak Prescott, who has the $60 million average annual value. He's at 55. You clearly should be above that. If you could have commanded that, if you really took a hard stance and were like, no, I want to be the highest paid quarterback in the league coming off your MVP season. I think this, and I don't even know if Josh Allen had much to do with this. I think the team probably approached his agent and said, hey, we'd like to rework his deal, move some of the money around so we can create some cap space in the near term. We'll give him a bunch of it guaranteed because they trust him as their franchise. They weren't going to let him go anywhere. This is just about making the smart move for the longer term, because he'll probably get another extension or a rework deal in 2 to 3 years, just like Patrick Mahomes did when he was with the Chiefs. Remember his mega deal that was 10 years and was like, oh my gosh, look how much money it was. over the course of time, you're like, oh, that wasn't that much money compared to what he could have gotten.
Yeah, I remember when I first got in the league, it was Tyron Smith signed 10 years, $100 million. And I was like, oh my God, like that's baseball money. Well, now you got these quarterbacks settling for the $230 million mark, and it's unbelievable. And you know what? They're a lot different than those pass rushers. Myles Garrett goes out and gets that deal. Micah Parsons is laughing it up. But Patrick Mahomes, he's pissed. All these guys, Joe Burrow, waiting in the wings to get their new deal. But for the Buffalo Bills, this is incredible because the only thing that you know is we have to lock this guy Josh Allen up because he is that special. He's that important to our team.
All right, guys, we certainly appreciate it, and more to discuss in terms of the NFL coming up on the other side with Pete, Danny, and Kyle. We got to talk about some change because people say change is good. The Eagles, they're dealing with a whole lot of that, especially on defense. But can Philly find a way to thrive with that change next season? We're going to discuss with the guys coming up.
Oh, it has been a wild few days. Teams have moved quickly. Most of the top players in free agency off the board, but don't fret. That doesn't mean there isn't still plenty of talent out there. Looking at some of the best available, this is Pete Prisco's top list. We're going to have some questions when it comes to this one. And for those questions, let's welcome the man himself in, Pete Prisco, Lee J. Duzabal, Katie Mox, Jenny Dell. All right, the list. You got Cam Robinson over Aaron Rodgers. I know a lot of people are going to question that move. Explain it.
Well, age is one thing. One guy's contemplating what he's going to do. The other guy wants to play. And he's playing a value position at left tackle. There aren't left tackles left in the market. And so I think that's why he's on that list. And look, there's flaws in Cam Robinson's game. Don't get me wrong. He's not a great run blocker. And that's always been a concern of mine with him. But he's still a starting left tackle in the league. And when you have a starting left tackle in the league, that's why he's going to be at that spot.
Yeah, without a doubt, he's probably going to supersede Aaron Rodgers because to Pete's point, who knows if Aaron Rodgers is even going to play? He could potentially retire, right? So that's an option.
You've been pushing that. You've been pushing that narrative.
I think that could happen.
I don't either.
I think he can retire.
I'm with Kate. I don't think so.
The ego. He's got to go out on a good year.
My thing is, I hear what you're saying about the ego. He wants to go out with a better record, but my thing is he defeated all the odds by coming back from an Achilles at 41 and playing 17 games. So to me as a player, I know the warrior mentality. To me, the most important thing was to go out, not on the field, to finish a season, and that's what he did. I mean, he has all the accolades in the war. And he doesn't need to go out there and play any more football. But I get what you're saying. He's a competitor, doesn't want to finish with a 5-12 record on his resume, being the last thing he did in football. But Cam Robinson, we saw it at the bottom. He struggled in pass pro too last year. I mean, you go back to that playoff game versus the Rams defensive line had their way with him, and I think that's why he's still available as a free agent, because we've seen guys with upside like Jalen Moore get paid upwards to $15 million, Dan Moore upwards to $20+ million. Usually left tackles go first on the first day of free agency, but I think there's some concern with Cam Robinson. You talked about his run blocking. His pass blocking has been a lack as well.
But one thing back to Aaron Rodgers retiring, if he was going to retire, he would have retired, I think, before last season. Because he was coming off the injury.
But he didn't want. I don't think he wanted to finish being hurt on the field.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I think I'm with Kay. I think he's going to play.
No,
I think there's too much there.
I think he's going to play too. And you look at where he's going to play. Obviously, a lot of people saying that it could be with the Steelers. That seems to be the top contender right now. There was some talks about the Giants, and now we've heard Brett Favre came out and said, "Do follow the path that I did. Go now to Minnesota." There's reports out there now saying the Vikings decision makers are still evaluating their options at quarterback, including the possibility of Aaron Rodgers. What's your take on that?
That would be the best situation for him of all the spots. I mean, Pittsburgh would be the next best, but if you could get to Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell and those wide receivers and the way they throw the football around and the way they call plays, it would be the ideal spot for Aaron Rodgers. And so if that's the case, and they're considering it, and maybe they know something.
Seems like they are, Pete.
Well, maybe they know something about J.J. McCarthy that we don't know. Because all the people I talked to last year said J.J. McCarthy was right there with Sam Darnold, ready to maybe even win that job in the preseason. Now all of a sudden he's not, and they're not confident in him. That's a concern of mine, because you can't bring Aaron Rodgers in not to play.
Correct.
If you bring Aaron Rodgers in, he's playing, and J.J. McCarthy is watching. That's basically what's going to happen. And so I think that from that scenario, if that's the case, best spot for him would be the Minnesota Vikings.
And that's my concern. Like, what would the conversation be? Because to your point, right, J.J. McCarthy looked good throughout preseason. Then he had the knee injury and missed the entire season. So if they feel like they've spent all this money in free agency, you talked about the receivers, the offensive line, that's another reason why Aaron Rodgers should go there, because they've really bolstered that offensive line. But if you have J.J. McCarthy in the waiting and say things start off a little rocky, you can go 4-4, Aaron Rodgers is going to want some guarantees that no matter what, he's starting the entire season, because he's going to have options to potentially either go to the New York Giants or even the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think there have to be some guarantees from, the front office and the coaching staff for Aaron Rodgers to go to Minnesota.
Yeah, but what if you guarantee it and he goes 9 for 28 in 2 straight games and you lose both of them? You got to sit him down. So you can take all the guarantees you want. They're not going to live up to them, but it is the best situation for him.
I agree that it's the best situation for him, but I also think that Aaron Rodgers needs like a real strong presence. I feel like Thompson is the only one that could really keep him in check. Let's talk about running backs now with Rico Dowdle, one of the lone bright spots for the Cowboys last year. It seems like his time is over. Javonte Williams, they picked up from Denver there. He was an undrafted rookie, got the starting spot, really ran with it, and now he's probably the best running back on the board, Pete.
He is, and I think the best thing about him is there's not a lot of wear and tear on the body. I mean, this is a veteran running back who showed last year he can carry the football, and there's not a lot of carries on him, on the body. So I think that gives him more value than maybe some of the other running backs. I don't think the book is closed on him in Dallas yet either. I know Javonte Williams, he only got a 1-year deal. Dowdle might not be getting the contract he wants from the Cowboys, but maybe they bring him back then they split carries or their second back or something, because there isn't a lot of wear and tear on that body. I think that's important for a running back.
But you know what's really hurting him, Pete? The draftable running backs. This is one of the deepest running back classes. And I think that's why he hasn't been signed. And you kind of look at the running back market, and you talked about it, Javonte Williams only signing a 1-year, like $3-point-something million deal. Najee Harris, who has 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, I think he signed for like $5 million, but he can, with incentives, can get up to $9 million. So I think the NFL teams are letting you know how they feel about these draftable running backs coming in. They're like, we're not going to overpay a veteran because we can get one of those guys in the draft. They will be starting running backs probably in the 3rd and 4th round in this draft.
Which is where you should always take them anyways.
Oh, Pete and his love of running backs. Let's talk about your love of receivers, which is actually present, which is nice to see. Cooper Kupp, Amari Cooper, those were some guys on your list. You look at, Keenan Allen also could be up there.
Yep.
You look at Kupp, though. The Rams released him today, so Offensive Player of the Year back in the day. 2 more years remaining on his contract. Where do you think these guys end up?
Well, I think there's a couple options for Kupp. I think that the Cowboys are one of them, opposite CeeDee Lamb. I think Seattle is another option, going back, to where he's from up there. And then I think Jacksonville's an option because there's some ties there to the Rams organization with Liam Cohen, the head coach, and also James Gladstone, the general manager, who came from the Rams. So wherever he goes, there has to be a number 1 wide receiver. And in Jacksonville, Brian Thomas would be that. In Dallas, CeeDee Lamb would be that. And in Seattle, Smith and Jigma would be that. So you look at it, he's a number 2. The one thing that stands out to me when you watch Cooper Kupp, he was never a burner to begin with, and now he's slower. That's a concern. The yards per catch went from 13.7 when he was the star to 10.6 last year. That tells you he doesn't scare anybody down the field. So he's got to be a complimentary receiver.
Yeah, for sure. I'll hit on, I think the Chargers, he can stay on the West Coast and go to the Chargers. They need a veteran presence with Ladd McConkey there as well. I know people will say they have a similar skill set, but Cooper Kupp can play all 3 positions. When you look at Amari Cooper, though, how about a reunion? Going to Las Vegas. Now, again, they don't have a true number 1 receiver. Brock Bowers is essentially their number 1 receiver, but I look for them to add a guy in the draft, potentially in the 1st round, since they traded for Geno Smith. So Amari Cooper is a guy that when he got traded to Buffalo, me and Pete both were like, oh, this is a big get. But he kind of got phased out of the offense. They really didn't even use him in that playoff run when they went to the AFC Championship game. So it'll be interesting to see the wear and tear still on Amari Cooper. He's still one of the best receivers in regards to creating separation at the line of scrimmage. They just didn't use him in Buffalo.
He doesn't run anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're the Buffalo Bills and you're going elsewhere to get wide receivers, Josh Palmer being who they brought in, and you leave Amari Cooper sitting there, that tells you what they think about him. And I think that's kind of the feeling about him. He's another guy who's more of a 2 or a 3 than he is a 1, and that's always a concern, especially when you get up in the years.
It is a changing of the guard with the wide receivers here. Pete, one interesting thing, Russell Wilson left off the top 10 free agents list here. At this point, it seems like he's going to sign with whoever doesn't get Rodgers, but Russ has met or will meet with the Browns and the Giants this week.
Well, good for them, because I wouldn't. I don't think he's very good right now. I'll be honest with you. I think he's more of a backup quarterback in the NFL. I thought that going into last year. I said that. I just think that's who he is right now, and I don't think that's who he wants to be. I think he still wants to be a starting quarterback. You saw what he did down the stretch for the Steelers. He wasn't very good. Even the games where he played okay, he's throwing those pop-ups down the sideline to George Pickens. He doesn't throw to the middle of the field. I just don't think he's very good, and I think teams are reluctant to bring him in because the stories you hear about him not being a great teammate either.
I mean, Katie, I think you hit it on the head when you talk about him potentially signing wherever Rodgers doesn't sign. I mean, that just doesn't sound good when you're a free agent quarterback. I'm waiting for somebody else to determine my future. And to Pete's point, right, it looked good for the first 6 weeks for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They go 6-1, and then they lose the last 5. And to Pete's point, right, turnovers in the red zone, not throwing in the middle of the field, not throwing in time, and taking hideous sacks is what Russell Wilson did down the stretch. So, again, I'm with Pete. I wouldn't start him to be I wouldn't sign him to be the starting quarterback. Maybe bring him as a compliment, as a veteran guy that maybe can, help a younger guy out if you draft somebody in the draft.
Lige, you talked about how you think that potentially Aaron Rodgers could retire. Is that something for Russell Wilson as well?
I don't think Russ is going to retire just because he helped lead the Pittsburgh Steelers to the playoffs last year. But the thing is a team willing to make him the starting quarterback, and that's a real talk he has to have with himself. Like, am I truly going to be given the opportunity to be the starter wherever I go?
But I mean, like Tennessee, their ideal scenario to bring a veteran quarterback in, they have no interest in him.
Right.
And the Steelers don't really sound like they want to bring him back. The Giants, is that going to save jobs if they sign Russell Wilson? I don't think so. So when all the chairs are taken up, he might be the kid still standing, if you play musical chairs. And so if that scenario what's he do? Does he become a backup?
Are you willing to be a backup?
Right.
That's the question at that point. Well, we will wait and see how it all plays out. That's what we do here at Spotlight and in CBS Sports HQ. And once there is news, you best believe we'll be talking about it. Lige Douzable, Pete Prisco, thanks for joining us.
Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. You want to take a shot on some long shots? Well, how about the longest shots to win the Super Bowl? The Giants and the Titans are tied for the longest odds at plus 20,000. At least the Titans have a quarterback. Jets currently sit at plus 15,000 with Justin Fields signed under center. They're tied with the Panthers, followed by the Browns, the Saints, and the Raiders, while the Colts are priced at plus 8,500. Still a long shot, but a little bit more manageable. And with that, let's get an NFL writer for CBSSports.com, Tyler Sullivan. Sully, a lot of moves have been made in free agency, but the jury is still out on just how impactful those moves will be, particularly when we look at some of these playoff hopefuls. So let's start with the Seahawks and Sam Darnold. Darnold, coming off his best season with the Vikings, had a lot of us thinking maybe we misjudged him. Maybe he just needed to be in a good system until the last 2 games of this season. Given what we know about Sam Darnold, are the Seahawks a playoff contender?
I don't think so. And they have probably made the biggest splash so far in free agency. Again, when you sign a quarterback to over $100 million deal, that's going to make some waves. I just don't know if those waves are going to have them sail all the way to the playoffs, just because I'm concerned about, as you referenced, what we saw at the end of the year with Sam Darnold. I kind of feel like that's a little bit more than who he is, as opposed to what we saw during the year. Not to try to take anything away from him. Tremendous year. Over 4,000 yards passing, 35 passing touchdowns. Very good for the Minnesota Vikings. But the thing about the Minnesota Vikings is that they're the perfect situation pretty much for any quarterback right now. Good offensive line, great wide receivers, especially Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson, Jordan Addison, a good backfield, great defense, unbelievable coaching staff. He now goes to Seattle. It's a worse coaching staff in my estimation, a worse offensive line, worse weapons because they just traded away DK Metcalf, JSN, great, but that's really it, and a worse defense. And you're in a division now, when you talk about that playoff game against the Los Angeles Rams, you're now in that division with Sean McVay, and he just prevented you from scoring double-digit points in the playoffs. So I don't think that Sean McVay is really, staying up at night saying that Sam Darnold's in his division. So I don't think that this is going to be that impactful in terms of the playoffs for Seattle.
You just eviscerated him on that one, and honestly, no notes, Sully. Agree with you completely. One quarterback that saw a lot of promise last season, but lacked sufficient protection was Caleb Williams, right, in Chicago. The Bears have been dominating the offseason, getting plenty of help on both the offensive and defensive lines. Might Chicago now be a contender for the postseason?
Yeah, I think so. And again, when we say contender, you know, they'll be in the graphic that says in the hunt, and we'll get all excited about the Chicago Bears. I don't know how far that'll take them, but ultimately they're going to be a much better team than they were a year ago. What were their two biggest issues? One was inefficiency at the coaching staff. So we saw in that Thanksgiving Day game just poor in-game management. But go back to that game, that infamous game against the Commanders where they let up that Hail Mary. It was poor coaching even there. I don't think that's going to happen with Ben Johnson. And then they go into free agency, even before free agency, address their next biggest need, which was the offensive line. Caleb Williams was sacked, as you can see there, 68 times. That's absolutely ridiculous. It's 101 of how to break a generational #1 pick quarterback. So what do? They go and do free agency. They sign Drew Dahlman to a really massive contract in terms of the center position. You go and trade for Joe Thuney and Jonah Jackson. You're fixing that offensive line. So if you're telling me that Caleb Williams is going to have more protection, better protection, and he still has solid receiving weapons, this team could be frisky late in the year.
You know, last year I had a long shot, and I believe maybe we talked about this on the Pick Six podcast. I thought that maybe the Chicago Bears would win their division. Seems like maybe I was just a year too early, maybe a couple years too early on that one. But let's talk about the Bengals here. They've been fairly quiet in free agency despite some wide receiver contract talks. Obviously, they tagged T. Higgins. They've been trying to work out a deal with Jamar Chase. But Sully, they've got issues on defense that need to be addressed. Are you worried about them, or is this like, we got Joe Burrow, they can still be a playoff team?
Well, the answer is both, right? Like, I'm not worried about them because they have Joe Burrow. Again, that 5-0 run at the end of the season shows why you can never count out the Cincinnati Bengals, because you have just one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Joe Burrow. So whenever you have that, you can sleep a little bit easier, especially when you have Jamar Chase there too. But I am concerned about this team because this is an organization that we shouldn't even be talking about. Can they make the playoffs or not? It's should they be able to win the Super Bowl? But they're not even there yet because of, as you referenced, the defense is still a massive problem, and they haven't really done anything to address it. In fact, they're going to get worse because they're trying to keep the band back together on offense, which is Jamar Chase, which obviously you have to do. You have to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL. But do you really need T. Higgins? I know you signed him to the franchise tag. He's a favorite of Joe Burrow. But when you have Joe Burrow, if you have those fringe number 1B wide receivers, you should be able to afford them to go and not at the expense of possibly, it seems like they're going to trade Trey Hendrickson, your #1 pass rusher, your really only good defensive player. This was a defense last year that allowed opponents, when they got into the red zone, to score a touchdown basically on 69% of the trips. That's third worst in the NFL. That can't happen if they're trying to win a Super Bowl. And again, we're just talking about them merely making the playoffs.
Yeah, have to agree with you on that one. Let's talk about those Patriots. Had the most cap space going into free agency. And boy, Sully, have they made the most of it. They resigned some key players. They added some big-time players like Milton Williams and Matt Collins, the guy that never seems to wear any shoes. Is it too ambitious to call this a potential playoff team?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm biased up in New England. So, it was fun to see them go on that spending spree. But overall, I think that this is a step in the right direction, but not something that's going to catapult them to the postseason. Sure, there were some needs on this roster, particularly on the defensive side. You get better and the coaching staff by hiring Mike Vrabel. You bring in Josh McDaniels as the OC. They're going to be a better, much well-coached football team in 2025. But there's still some issues that this team needs to address. Again, we're just at the start of the new league year. Free agency has been only a couple of days. They still need a #1 wide receiver. They still need a left tackle. These are legitimate issues to this team contending and getting back into the conversation of the playoffs. So yes, Milton Williams, great addition to a defense that was dead last in the NFL in sacks last season. But overall, this is one of the poorest, weakest, talented rosters in the NFL last year, so it needs a little bit more.
Tell us how you really feel about those Patriots. Lastly, the Jets officially released Aaron Rodgers today. No surprise. They said they were going to do as much. Justin Fields will take over as a signal caller with $30 million guaranteed. Sully, the expectations are not as high, right, as they were with Rodgers. But could this be a playoff team with Justin Fields?
Yeah, I don't think so. And I like the Justin Fields signing. I think, it reminds me, and you'll appreciate this. It reminds me of that Sunday morning when you put a bunch of legs together on a parlay. That kind of makes sense. You throw $10 on it and you can win like 200 grand. It's that generational wealth parlay. You're like, all right, if it hits, this is great. I'm going to the Caribbean. If it doesn't, I only lost $10. This is kind of what this feels like at the quarterback position, where Justin Fields has shown us a little bit at times, but still overall not the consistency that you want. Again, this is a quarterback that's 14-30 as a starter in his career, but he is still young. So if it hits, it's great. If not, you only sign him to a deal that has an average of $20 million per season. So again, it's interesting. It's low risk, but overall, I don't think this is something that's going to propel them to the playoffs.
I love that analogy because nothing feels better than just firing off on that parlay and you think, I am a genius and I'm going to be so rich. And then as the day goes on, there's always that one leg that will come back and bite you. Tyler Sullivan, as always, appreciate you.
NFL free agency opening in full on the first day of the NFL new league year. Four-time Pro Bowl defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence leaving Dallas for a new 3-year, $42 million deal with the Seattle Seahawks. $18 million guaranteed for the 32-year-old who played just 4 games last season thanks to a foot injury. Head coach Sean Payton thinks he's got his offensive joker in the form of 30-year-old tight end Evan Engram. Engram signing a 2-year deal with $16.5 million guaranteed with the Denver Broncos Wednesday. Engram had a career year in 23 before injuries limited him to just 8 games in 2024 with the Jaguars. 2021 NFL Offensive Player of the Year and Super Bowl MVP Cooper Kupp has been released by the Los Angeles Rams after they couldn't find a trade partner for the 31-year-old receiver. Rams signing Devontae Adams to a 2-year deal back on Sunday. Kupp still owed $5 million in guaranteed salary from the Rams in 2025, even though he will be playing elsewhere. Here's a list of the notable receivers still on the market, and it is a notable list indeed. A bunch of players with incredible resumes, all coming with their own accolades and potential pitfalls, be it injury, age, or whatever it may be. And welcome in to CBS Sports HQ. Russ Thaler here with CBS Sports NFL analyst and draft expert Ryan Wilson. Let's start with Cooper Kupp. We're talking about a guy who won the Triple Crown not too long ago as a receiver, a Super Bowl MVP. Injuries have taken their toll. He's still getting $5 million from the Rams, which I think is not insignificant for other teams that may want to sign him. So what's the market for Cooper Kupp and where maybe some of the best landing spots?
I'm laughing, Russ, because I aspire to be owed $5 million, and I can choose
Don't we all?
do what I want in my early 30s. And that list, that graphic, we saw the remaining available top wide receivers, all guys north of 30. So those are the conversations teams are having. But in terms of Cooper Kupp in particular, Cowboys make sense. CeeDee Lamb, we've talked for years, it feels like needs help on the other side from him, and certainly Dak Prescott would appreciate that. You have teams like the Seahawks, who moved on from Tyler Lockett. They traded DK Metcalf to the Steelers. They're a team in flux. Yes, they have Sam Darnold. We saw the signing with DeMarcus Lawrence on the other side of the ball, but I think there's still a lot of juice left in the squeeze of Cooper Kupp. But you talked about it. The injuries have been the concern with him. When he's healthy, he's as good as they come in the slot, and that's going to probably be his future, whether it's the next 2 or 3 years, whatever it ends up being. He'll man the slot, he'll control the middle of the field, and he'll be a security blanket in much the same way we see these tight ends are in today's NFL. The Ravens are another team that could use some help at wide receiver. Yes, they have D-Hop, someone else north of 30, someone who's still probably not quite as fast as he once was, and that was never really his game. His game was always being a contested catch machine. And I think finally the Broncos, and you mentioned Sean Payton getting his joker, Evan Engram. The contract says that maybe there's some wiggle room to add some more players at the skill position for the Denver Broncos, and I think Cooper Kupp feels like another great security blanket for a young quarterback in Bo Nix to go along with Evan Engram.
Look, Broncos, a team on the rise. I think a lot of people are expecting them to take another step in 2025. Russell Wilson, he used to play for the Broncos. He also used to play for the Steelers, and apparently he's going to go visit Cleveland on Thursday and then immediately head back to Jersey to take on a meeting with the New York Giants on Friday. So Russell Wilson looking around, some teams poking around. Where do you think Russ ends up?
I think what we should start doing, and we should start today, writing headlines for 5 years from now, because if I told you that the headline was going to be that the Denver Broncos dump Russ, he goes to Pittsburgh, and then the next year he's in Cleveland, you would have to wonder what could have possibly gone wrong. But here's what's gone wrong. He's 36 years old. He's not the player he once was. It didn't work out with Sean Payton. He started off strong in Pittsburgh, and they lost 5 games in a row. And Cleveland needs a quarterback. Deshaun Watson has never been the answer there. He keeps getting injured, which just compounds the issue. They've traded for Kenny Pickett, so they're stockpiling former Steelers quarterbacks, it looks like. But I think the issue for Russ is this. We were talking about it upstairs, Russ. We have to figure out where Aaron Rodgers ends up, because I think he is number 1 in the pecking order, whether the Pittsburgh Steelers or the New York Giants looking for a quarterback. And then the next domino will be Russ Wilson deciding, does he want to take the other team? Does he want to do something else? And that's what we have to wait and find out. And as you know, Aaron Rodgers works on his own schedule, so he may be telling us something tomorrow or 2 months from now.
That's my follow-up, because we know Aaron Rodgers went and met with the Jets when the Jets told him they were going to move on. And they officially moved on from Aaron Rodgers on Wednesday, releasing the 4-time NFL MVP. But other than that, we haven't really heard anything, and not that we're surprised by this at all, but we're hearing where Russell Wilson is going to meet with teams. Do we really know who's actually interested in Aaron Rodgers or where he is interested in playing?
Yeah, according to reports, and I have to double check and see if our Jonathan Jones reported this as well, but the Steelers are interested and the Giants are interested. Right. The team's also interested in Russ, probably as a contingency plan. The other thing, and there have been sort of murmurings that maybe Aaron chooses to retire. That doesn't feel like how Aaron Rodgers might want to go out, given how his last 2 years went with the Jets. He seems like someone who has thrived on having a chip on his shoulder, perceived or otherwise. And I think the other thing is, again, on the outside looking in, the perception is that he likes to be in control of the situation. So if that means dragging his feet just to get perhaps what he wants, maybe that's what he does. Because the Steelers are over a barrel here. They missed out on Justin Fields, who they wanted to bring back because the Jets gave them more money. Sam Darnold was something that they were sort of interested in, but he got paid a ton by the Seattle Seahawks. And I still don't understand why they didn't consider trading for Geno Smith, which was a 3rd-round pick.
Look, you spend most of your time working on draft stuff. We know that. Yeah. You got the podcast with the first pick. Check that out. Download, subscribe, all that good stuff. How does the Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, the musical chairs that are going on here with free agent quarterbacks affect the quarterbacks that are set to be drafted here?
Yeah, I think Cam Ward still goes number 1 to the Tennessee Titans. They've bolstered the offensive line, added a playmaker or two at the skill position. But at the end of the day, it's all about the quarterbacks for them. And then it's a wide open race. Shedeur Sanders, it feels like some distance has been created between him and Cam Ward coming out of the combine. Not because he didn't perform well physically, because neither he nor Cam threw, but in terms of how the interviews were perceived by the team. So the Giants are still going to be interested in Cam, perhaps the Cleveland Browns, and Shedeur Sanders. But I've also talked to folks that think this could be a Will Levis-like slip if Shedeur Sanders gets past the first 4 or 5 picks. The Raiders, as we talked about, have Geno Smith. Does he slip down to the Saints, who pick just inside the top 10? Does he make his way to 21, where the Steelers are? Do the Rams take him at 26? So these are all conversations we have to have. And, of course, the wild card, Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart, who perhaps finds his way into the back end of the first round.
Jackson Dart is the name you keep hearing over and over again. That's the one that could make the big leap this year. Look, things could change at any moment. We're all here for it here on CBS Sports HQ, and grateful to have Ryan Wilson with us in studio on this day. Ryan, thanks so much. And check out Ryan's podcast with the first pick. And he's doing it with Rick Spielman, longtime NFL GM. The mock drafts are fluid, man. They're coming out with them. Every time something changes, there seems to be a new mock draft, also doing position rankings and all the good stuff. Download it, subscribe, or just scan that QR code right there and check out With the First Pick. Couple guys with big-time resumes got their walking papers on Wednesday. 2021 receiving Triple Crown winner, NFL Offensive Player of the Year, and Super Bowl MVP. Cooper Kupp released by the Rams. And the Jets officially let go of 4-time NFL MVP Aaron Rodgers. The new league year coming in like a lion in the NFL. It is all happening. Here's a look at the movement at quarterback so far this offseason. Sam Darnold had that great year with the Vikings and signs a big contract now with the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith played so long in Seattle, and now he's traded to the Raiders. Justin Fields going from Pittsburgh to the Jets. And Daniel Jones from being a backup in Minnesota to possibly competing for the starting job in Indianapolis. All right, we're doing a little NFL free agency superlatives on a Wednesday with Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports. And not just today. We'll take it all the way back to the opening of free agency, all right? We're going to start with the biggest surprise. What was the biggest surprise so far to you?
This is like old school high school yearbook. The biggest, best hair. That would be you.
Not neither of us.
I'm going to go with Geno Smith. And I was surprised when that news came down. I think it was last Friday. It feels like it was 3 years ago. It's been so long. He goes to a team in Las Vegas that's feels like they're turning the corner. They have Pete Carroll as their new head coach. Chip Kelly is going to be the OC. And they've certainly upgraded the quarterback position, which was their biggest need coming in to the offseason. Last year, Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew were not the answer. 12 quarterbacks, let's see, 6 quarterbacks were taken in the top 12 picks a year ago, so they were just on the outside looking in. They picked 13th, got Brock Bowers, home run hit. Now you have the quarterback in Geno Smith, and you might say, hey, Geno threw 15 interceptions last year. That Seahawks offensive line was in a bad way. This Vegas line is going to be a little bit better, and I think he's going to have an opportunity to allow this team to compete in that incredibly tough AFC West.
Of course, surprise is one thing, but teams are looking to make an impact, to improve in a big way in the offseason. Who's made the most impactful moves for their team so far?
Bears GM Ryan Poles has done a great job of surrounding Caleb Williams with big guys who can protect him, because that was the thing last year we saw for the first 2/3 of the season, in that Caleb was playing a lot of hero ball that we saw at USC, and also the offensive line was in shambles at times. The edge rushers, the bookends, right tackle and left tackle, Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones, were good when they were healthy, but the interior was a huge point of contention, and they went out and got Drew Dalman in the center. They traded for Jonah Jackson, and they also traded for Joe Tooney, who had to kick out at left tackle in an emergency situation for the Chiefs. So I think they are doing all the right things ahead of the draft to protect Caleb Williams. The last month of the season, Caleb finally looked a little comfortable. They have a new OC in there. They have a new head coach in Ben Johnson, who we know what he's going to bring to the party offensively. And I think now that the interior of that offensive line is bolstered, expect Caleb Williams to take the step forward.
All right, look, whether it's teams getting desperate who need to make a leap, or just people talking themselves into maybe a free agent, we are going to look back on some of these free agents and say, man, that guy got way overpaid, or they'll outplay their deal. But who do you think was the biggest overpay so far?
I'm going to say Sam Darnold, even though he's only averaging, quote-unquote, $33 million a year, which is mediocre at best when you stack him against the best paid, the highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL. But he's getting that payday off of one fantastic season and an offense that was tailor-made for him to have success. Now he goes to a team where, as I just mentioned, the offensive line has had some concerns. They're going to have to try to bolster the interior of that offensive line, not yet through free agency in Seattle, but maybe through the draft. We'll see what happens. There were offensive line issues due to injury in Minnesota, but Kevin O'Connell and all those playmakers certainly made life easier for Sam Darnold. No DK Metcalf, no Tyler Lockett. I'm not sure if he's going to be able to recreate in Seattle what we saw and what could end up being a one-year wonder in Minnesota a year ago. So an overpay in the sense that Sam Darnold maybe hasn't earned it over the course of his career, but I understand why the Seahawks did it, because they just moved on from Geno.
Look, none of these moves happen in a vacuum, right? One player goes to one team, that opens up a spot on a different team, and then, and this is something you work on every day, the draft is coming up too. Yeah. So what move in free agency so far do you think is going to have the biggest domino effect when it comes to the draft?
Yeah, I said last night that one of the biggest winners through the first 2 days of free agency were the New England Patriots, because they have done a lot of good things, primarily on defense, but they got some help on offense from Drake May as well in terms of Morgan Moses and Matt Collins. But I love the idea of them signing Carlton Davis, the other corner, to pair opposite their former first-round pick, Christian Gonzalez. And I say that, Russ, because this means at 4, if Travis Hunter's there, you don't have to worry about him playing cornerback. You put him as a wide receiver. He's a big play wide receiver. He'll be the #1 wide receiver on day one, just because he is so incredibly productive. And you give Drake May a much-needed target that he lacked his rookie season in New England.
All right, last thing, because we're not done yet. Free agency is still going on. The draft's coming up. What's the biggest chip still to fall? What's the next big thing?
He's in a hut somewhere, sitting in total darkness maybe. Aaron Rodgers, we got to figure out what his plans are. We talked earlier tonight about Russ Wilson visiting the Browns, probably going to visit the Giants. And those two quarterbacks are probably going to land in one of those two places. I think the first domino has to be Aaron Rodgers, and that will determine what happens with Russ Wilson. A couple other big-name wide receivers are still out there. Steph Diggs is still available coming off the ACL injury. Amari Cooper, who never quite put it together when he was traded to the Bills last fall. But I think Aaron Rodgers, you know, it's all in his hands. He has to decide what he wants to do, and I think he probably likes the attention. The Steelers are between a rock and a hard place. less so for the Giants because they picked near the top of the draft. So he can determine the Steelers' fate both in the near term and what their quarterback plans are going to have to be should he decide he doesn't want to go to Pittsburgh. And Russ, your guess is as good as mine when we find out what Aaron Rodgers' plans are.
Before we sign off here, is there like a cutoff date where Aaron Rodgers is going to have to make a move or teams are going to have to decide without him making a decision?
Well, I mean, the speculation is that Kirk Cousins could wait until after the draft to decide his landing spot to see how it shakes out with the other teams that need quarterbacks. And I suppose Aaron Rodgers could do the same thing. He would be much more a much more valuable commodity right now than Kirk Cousins. He's a year further removed, I believe, maybe the same time frame actually in the Achilles. So they got to sort that out. But he can wait as long as he wants because he is Aaron Rodgers.
If Aaron Rodgers thought that people didn't like him very much right now, wait till after the draft and he hasn't picked the team yet. My goodness. Ryan, thanks so much, man. Much appreciated. Here's a look at the updated odds to win the Super Bowl right now. The defending champs have the shortest odds with the Ravens, Chiefs following behind, and then the Bills. Those three teams obviously top of the AFC. The Lions next in line in the NFC at plus 1,000 as far as winning the Super Bowl is concerned.